SEC preview part 3, Dan Rubenstein. We made it to part 3.
There's a guy in LA. I want to say his name is Larry Miller, and he is a mattress salesman, or your mattress is free, and you've got that vibe to him.
Thank you. I think if this doesn't work out, perhaps mattress sales is for me.
Yeah. Sit and sleep. There's your free promo.
Not a sponsor, still could be.
Not a sponsor. I'll take it. It could be. I like mattresses.
Hey, we're back. We're talking SEC. Go back and listen to parts 1 and 2. Part 1 was bigger picture stuff. We talked about our contender tiers.
Yes.
Part 2, we broke down 8 teams. On today's episode, we have Alabama and LSU,
Woo.
Tennessee and Oklahoma,
Yeah.
Kentucky and Auburn, South Carolina and Arkansas.
Wow.
A lot of interest in all of those 8 teams that I just listed off. Much more interest in the other 8 teams that we did in part 2. So go back and listen to that.
Hey, sorry for the quick interruption, but it'd be incredible if you considered subscribing to the Solid Verbal YouTube channel right down below. I'm ready to go.
I want to talk Alabama.
Alabama.
I want to talk. Anything happen with Alabama in the
Business
offseason?
as usual. Business as usual, Ty. Another year. Everything seems to be the same. Sidelines, roster, recruit. Alabama's Alabama. Where are we going next?
We'll just pan them. We'll go Arkansas.
Go to LSU?
Yeah, no.
Okay. So Alabama has sort of like, to me, the more things change, the more things seem to be the same. And I'll explain why. Alabama has the biggest offseason change of all in losing Nick Saban to retirement, but he'll be gracing our screens on game day or whatever, right? On ESPN college football content options. So Kalen DeBoer takes over, fresh off of a really impressive run at Washington, where they end up in the national championship game and have a bunch of players drafted and have a high-flying offense. And everywhere Kalen DeBoer goes, he wins big. Kind of like Nick Saban, sort of. Alabama's fascinating. Alabama's entire offseason has been fascinating to me. From the guys who have left from both the recruiting class and the roster, 1 or 2 have come back. Caden Proctor, starting left tackle, left for Iowa, where he's from, came back during the summertime. Alabama is fascinating this season. I think they're going to have a lot of firepower. I think they're going to answer a number of questions early. I know they have Wisconsin week 2, I want to say, up in Madison, Camp Randall. So that'll be a good opportunity to showcase the new Alabama for all to see early on. I'm high on Alabama. I'm high on Alabama because if you're telling me the starting point is promising, at least promising to very good skill talent, perhaps not at Alabama's level in recent years, Jalen Milroe with a head coach who has been very good with quarterbacks, albeit now a head coach without his now longtime offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who decided to come to Alabama, but then made the move to the Seattle Seahawks with Mike McDonald. A great offensive line, an experienced offensive line, running backs who should be good to very good, and a defense that should be good to very good. I think we're talking about an Alabama team that's going to be measured up against itself, which is fair, and recent Nick Saban teams. But all things considered, their starting point for losing what they've lost is still pretty great to me. Now you get to play that? I thought that was my...
You didn't play it the first 2 episodes,
right.
so I'm jumping in.
I lost track. I was so excited. Jump in.
Listen, it is not a talent thing with Alabama.
No.
It is not a talent thing. It is a transition thing. It's a transition thing.
Yeah.
Kalen DeBoer is not Nick Saban. He's never going to be. But he's been crazy successful everywhere the dude's been. He's built up the other teams he's coached, which isn't really an issue here. He doesn't have to do that. Again, starting point. Starting point is at a much different place than it was at Washington or Fresno or anywhere else. I think 2 things, though, are true at once. A, you shouldn't write off Bama.
No.
Because this was, frankly, a once-in-a-generation type thing where you get a coach of Saban's caliber and then he leaves and you got to replace him with somebody. They replaced him with probably the best available coach. Outside of Kirby Smart, I mean, who else were they going to get that was going to...
Well, they looked at what? Dan Lanning, Sark, Mike Norvell. Yeah.
All of those guys are good names, right? And I'd be willing to put them all kind of on the same plane Like they're just, you were never going to get somebody that was going to replace Saban, but certainly by going out and getting Kalen DeBoer, you didn't do poorly. The cupboard is well stocked, and I think they're fine as a starting point. I also don't think, as I said a couple times now, that you can just assume a seamless transition. When the best coach in the history of the damn sport retires, you can't assume just a seamless transition. Like it's going to go on.
But that coach recruited this roster.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
I know. I get it. But I'm just not willing to go that far with Alabama. Their over-under, by the way, is 9.5 points.
Yeah.
9.5 wins, excuse me. The other thing that I'll mention here, and I'll kind of harken back to something I probably said back in February at this point, but I'm really interested to see what Jalen Milroe looks like in this system, because Kalen DeBoer and the offense that he has run, now granted that was with Ryan Grubb, but the offense that he has gotten accustomed to running is a version of the air raid. More modernized, maybe more pro style, but that's kind of what it
ran
is.
well last year. Yeah.
Ran great last year.
Yeah.
I don't know if that system works with Jalen Milroe. I'm not sure.
Well, how would you? You've never seen him try.
Well, we've never seen him try. And so I'm curious. Milroe is not a precision passer. He threw a great deep ball. The best version of the Bama offense a year ago used the running game to bunch people up, to make people afraid, and then they bomb it deep. Or they would use the threat of his legs to help bring in defensive backs and then loop it over the top. I would hope that they would do something similar. My guess is that they will.
Yeah.
But if they try to fit Jalen Milroe into the old system, I think that could be very interesting. My hot take from a few months ago was that Milroe wouldn't finish the season as Alabama's starting quarterback. Probably unlikely. Like I knew at the time, even when I said it.
Yeah.
Feels like a bit of a hot take to me, but that was the point of that show. I'm just genuinely curious to see how this offense looks running a different system. If Kalen DeBoer has any sort of growing pains working with Jalen Milroe, since he is a different kind of quarterback than he's had in the past. This is all a very long way of saying that Alabama will still be very good. I don't have that many concerns about this team because there is so much talent there, because Kalen DeBoer is still a damn good coach. But if we are forced in this preview segment to look at Bama, to think critically, that's where I go first.
Okay. So we haven't mentioned defense at all, which has, even with the offensive fireworks recently, that has been the calling card of Nick Saban's long tenure at Alabama. Bama's in pretty good shape with some questions on defense. I think they've got quality beef. I think there's still questions on the edge about who takes over, because they've had two essentially all-American caliber dudes in Dallas Turner and Will Anderson recently. Linebackers in pretty good shape. DB is thin, but they brought in transfers once again. I wonder what that looks like when it's decidedly not a Saban defense. Last year, I think Kevin Steele did a really nice job executing what Alabama does on defense. When you look at how they adjusted over the course of games against quality teams, you see a lot of like, oh, that team scored 7 points or 10 points or 17 points in the first half. Then they scored 3 in the second half. Then they scored no points in the second half. There was a good chunk of that. So I think that's going to be fascinating to watch, which stars step up or which guys become stars. And they do return some star power on each of the 3 levels. I'm just curious what that looks like when it's now a Kane Womack Mo Linguist defense and not a Nick Saban, insert defensive coordinator here defense. That to me is the potential for danger, considering the upside on Alabama's schedule offensively. Offensively, I think they're going to be fine. I think Caleb DeBoer is a smart enough offensive mind and head coach, along with Nick Sheridan and Jamarcus Shepard, the receivers coach and co-coordinator, that they're not going to try to force, a circle into a square hole or anything like that. They're going to find ways to best use Jalen Milroe and best put him in a position to succeed. Like at times Tommy Rees did last year. There were games where he struggled, the offensive line in front of him struggled, that as a team they struggled to separate from inferior opponents, which, by the way, Kalen DeBoer in Washington last year, big game wins like Alabama last year with, how they were able to beat Georgia in the SEC championship and how Washington was able to beat Oregon a couple times, but also playing down to opponents. So that's a fascinating element to the Kalen DeBoer hire is he able to field a team? Is he able to game plan with a team to win games comfortably that he should win comfortably. I think Alabama's going to win a ton. You look at their schedule, it's an interesting stretch early with its South Florida, at Wisconsin, a bye week before Georgia. The Georgia game is in Tuscaloosa. At Tennessee, Mizzou, that's a tough back-to-back tie.
Yeah,
It's just they get a bye before LSU, as both LSU and Bama have traditionally had. And finishing at Oklahoma, Auburn at home in the Iron Bowl. It's a tough schedule. It's not an impossible schedule. I think far more teams that I just listed are more scared of Alabama than vice versa. So I think I have Bama going 10-2 this year and going over that win threshold of what, 9.5?
9.5, yeah.
So the danger is firepower and offensive experience. And to me, the danger that I would worry about with Alabama is more how many pieces are there on defense that are truly changing games, especially in that like back seven.
Okay. I think that's fair. This is not an easy schedule.
No.
It's not an easy schedule. And that's not to say that Alabama's ever really played an easy schedule. Specifically as of late, they've gone out, they've played teams in the non-conference. In the SEC West, they have always had a difficult road. So there's no denying this is something they are used to. But to say that they're used to it amid all of this other transition would be a stretch. This is also new, I think, for them. It's been since the beginning of our podcast, literally, since they've actually been in this position of trying to break in a new coach. I think DeBoer will be fine. I think, to your point, they're going to be fine. But
receiver is interesting to me.
Yeah.
So they only returned one receiver of consequence in Kobe Prentice, who had some nice moments last year. They're going to need somebody young to step up. They've got big-time dudes coming in. Ryan Williams and Caleb Odom are the big names. They're going to need somebody either from the portal or young to step in immediately. I think they will, but they lost a lot of yardage via receive. Jermaine Burton, guys like that, Isaiah Bond transfers. Like, that to me is going to be the difference maker. They need to find a winter wonder, at least. Somebody who is a January player, not just a September one.
Can we stay in the old SEC West and do LSU quickly?
Let's do it.
I think LSU's fascinating.
Same.
LSU's offense last season was incredible. Their defense was also incredible, although on both opposite ends of the spectrum. When I put together my tiers, which you can listen to in part 1, I put LSU in my internal dilemma tier. And it's because there's parts of this team that I really like and other parts that I don't. They were 10-3 a year ago. They won their bowl game. Jane Daniels won the Heisman Trophy. I look at this team, I say, very obviously the offensive line is loaded. It's a great place to start. The linebacking core, also loaded. I'm not that worried about the offense. I think they'll be fine. But I'm not crazy about the defensive line nor the defensive backs. Plus, they've got 2 new coordinators. So there's some transition, but a ton of talent. Regardless of how I feel personally about Brian Kelly, the scorned Notre Dame fan that I am, he's a good coach. He's been here before. He knows how to build a program. And the schedule's okay. So you see where I'm coming from. There are some things that are in conflict there. Did you feel similarly when you looked at LSU? Their over-under's 9. So Vegas still expects a very, very successful campaign. But
right.
I felt very conflicted internally when I was looking through all this material.
There's very little on this schedule that on LSU's schedule. Like, is Brian Kelly the best coach on Brian Kelly's schedule? I'm serious. Like, you look around. I think Brian Kelly's better than Lincoln Riley. He's better than Deshaun Foster. He's better than Mike Elko. He's better than Caleb DeBoer, probably, just because he's been successful at a higher level longer. Better than Billy Napier. Like, they're in a really good place, LSU is. And so, who do they finish? Oh, LSU now finishes with Oklahoma. He's better than Brent Venables as a head coach. So they're going to have that, your favorite term, decided schematic advantage or decided head coaching advantage in a lot of instances. They should have good quarterback play. They definitely will have a very good offensive line. I think their receivers are at the very least good, if not another year of very strong receiver play.
Agreed.
So it's Kyron Lacey, Chris Hilton, CJ Daniels coming in from Liberty, Xavier Thomas coming in from Mississippi State. We'll see on the running game. I know Caleb Jackson is the big name, bigger body that they hope breaks through this year. Looks like he could. But you're right. I can name all the offense I want, and even without Mike Denbrock, I'm not terribly worried. It's an internal quarterback coach hire in Joe Sloan, who's well regarded. Like, their offense is going to be good. I hope Garrett Nussmeier doesn't throw a bunch of picks. He's going to throw some picks, and we just all have to make peace with that.
He is a bit of a gunslinger.
He's a bit like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to throw some 50-50 balls, and I trust my dudes. And that's fine.
That's fine.
I like it. Defensively, you're right. I think they'll be okay on the edge. You're right about doubting Quality Beef. Name of my fantasy football team this year, by the way, Quality Beef. Harold Perkins is moving back inside, but they've been very clear that they're going to move him around a bunch, that he's not just like a strict Mike or a strict inside linebacker or a strict, blitzer off the edge or, strictly a weak side. He's just going to be a piece they move around. And because of Blake Baker, new defensive coordinator's background, I trust him. I trust him with linebackers. I trust that he is going to look at Harold Perkins' skill set, his speed, his tenacity, that he is going to be a versatile weapon on this LSU defense and is going to be one of the reasons why it improves. You're right to doubt the secondary once again, bringing in transfers to help shore things up in the short term, which didn't work obviously last year. Hopefully it does this year. But we talked about this on the first episode of the SEC preview. There are a lot of teams, the majority of teams in the SEC this year, look at their quarterback situation and say, I think it's going to work out, but I hope it's going to work out. But I'm not positive. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to get. So it's probably as good a year as any in the SEC to be rebuilding a defense that I think LSU can take a noticeable step forward. Maybe it's a step forward to average. Maybe it's a step forward to decent at times. I don't think they're going to, turn around and become like the 2011 LSU defense. Right. But given their schedule, again, given the quarterbacks on it, given that they have, we'll see with, Miller Moss and USC. That's in Vegas, right?
Yep.
I think LSU is in a very nice place to approach complete as a team this year. And I think the Brian Kelly factor counts for a lot. I think they should be able to win 9 games and be in that playoff conversation as a 9-win SEC team has a good chance of being.
There's a chance they destroy USC in week 1.
Sure, certainly.
Which would kind of be a letdown, to be honest, because it's a Sunday night game. It's in Vegas. It's an ABC thing.
Yeah.
All eyes are going to be on that stage in Allegiant Stadium. I think LSU is far and away a better team. I just do. And
USC has some good receivers. We haven't gotten there yet, but they have some really interesting talents
pieces
at receiver. Yeah.
If you're giving me an option between the talent on hand for LSU and Miller Moss behind maybe a questionable line, I guess it's gotten better with their receivers. I would probably take LSU 9 times out of 10.
The back half is a little bit more interesting to me, and I like that LSU gets both LA schools, USC and UCLA. Ole Miss at Arkansas, at A&M, a bye, Bama, at Florida, which is always an emotional game, Vandy, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
That is a meaty middle that will be tricky if they don't get their defense figured out by, early to mid-October.
So the over-under is 9. Do you see this as
I wouldn't touch it. I think 9 is the number.
I think 9's the number. Do you see them at 8-4, though? You see them losing 4 of those games? I don't.
So if they're losing 4 of those games, it's, Ole Miss, at A&M, Bama, and Oklahoma. Nah, Oklahoma's at home. That's tough. Ole Miss. So there's the sneaky, and Arkansas is, and we'll get there, they're far and away my gumpy team of the year in the SEC. Yeah. Arkansas, I have it in front of me somewhere. I'll pull it up when we talk about the Hogs. They get a lot of teams and a lot of inconvenient spots for those teams. Looking ahead to this, coming after this, in a sandwich between these two matchups.
Yeah.
That true. Might be, just because we've seen recent LSU Arkansas games, you're like, that shouldn't be close, and it be a 3-4 point game. Weird, ugly game.
Okay.
That would be that matchup. If Bobby Petrino has an interesting Arkansas offense and the line improves, that would be a terrifying game if I'm an LSU fan.
Do you just want to stick with it and do Arkansas?
You just want this run of Dan?
Well, we can do Arkansas or Oklahoma. Why don't we do Oklahoma, since you mentioned
Oklahoma? Let's do Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, 7.5 over-under, which is not something I am used to seeing with Oklahoma. No. Certainly not in the Big 12. But 10-3 a year ago, they lost to both Kansas and Oklahoma State during the regular season and to Arizona in the Alamo Bowl. They just got to this conference a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
But already, I think, the most interesting team in the SEC. Absolutely. They are the ultimate brain teaser this year, trying to figure these guys out. I went back and forth on Oklahoma a million times because there are things that I think are in direct conflict. On one hand, you've got key components of last year's offense that are gone, namely Dylan Gabriel, went to Oregon, the entire line, rebuilding their line, 114th in returning production on offense. On the other, Jackson Arnold could end up being a better quarterback than they had before in time. Brent Venables was aggressive in the transfer portal trying to reconstruct that line, the aforementioned line. And he also added a guy like a Deion Burks, the dangerous receiver who's going to work out of the slot from Purdue. On one hand, you've got Jeff Lebby, the offensive coordinator who is now gone. And on the other, you talk to Oklahoma fans from last year, they're glad he's gone. They were sick of Jeff Lebby last year. They were tired of what they perceived, as some predictable play calling and not doing enough with the talent on
late
hand.
In games, yep.
Yeah, and so the flip side is that Seth Luttrell, friend of the show, Seth Luttrell, now calling the plays. Okay. On one hand, you got a defense that's third in returning production, 9 starters back, poised, I think, to be one of the better defenses in the country. On the other, Oklahoma's got the third toughest schedule in the country. And that includes games against Tennessee and Texas and Ole Miss and Mizzou and Alabama and LSU, among others. So there's just a lot like clashing there. And I don't know what to think about it.
Didn't even mention the Maine Black Bears thrown in there.
Didn't even mention the Maine Black Bears and their terrifying bear mascot.
It is a great bear mascot. Yeah.
Terrifying. It looks like a bat, not even a bear. My thing personally is this. I really like Jackson Arnold. I think he's worth the hype. He's very young. You could look at his stats from a year ago and you could say, all right, he was decent. But I recall vividly talking to Oklahoma fans, going and doing research from, team sites to guys who break down the film. And across the board, people were heralding what they saw out of Jackson Arnold from a processing standpoint. Maybe the numbers weren't there. He only got limited action, but his ability to see the field and break down the field and make plays was really impressive, even in limited action.
Yeah.
So when he came in, again, in limited action, filled in for Dylan Gabriel when he was down, I think we saw enough to feel good about him getting this role on a full-time basis and it not being too much for him, which would be very easy to do going against a schedule like this into a bigger conference like this or a more prominent conference like the SEC. So I feel good about that. I like Seth Luttrell calling the plays. I think he's going to build something that doesn't put it all on a young quarterback, that offers some balance. The line is the question mark. But if you're going to turn a line over to anybody, Bill Bedenbaugh kind of has a reputation for piecing together a line. It's just what the guy does. He's like a line soothsayer. He's going to figure it out before long. Feel okay about that?
Sure.
And if we're going back to the wise prophet Ashanti, yeah, I trust Brent Venables is going to figure out how to build a defense. It took a couple years. I was terrified as all hell about Ted Roof being there for 2 of them. But he's gone now, and it seems like things are trending in a very, very positive direction on the defensive side of the ball. Still missed too many tackles a year ago, still gave up too many big plays, all that. But a notable step forward that I have no reason to doubt won't continue. If you look back at what Brent Venables did in his time at Clemson, granted, was not the head coach, but those defenses were absolute nails. Those defenses absolutely could go toe-to-toe with SEC offenses. If he can get anywhere close to that at Oklahoma in his time there or at Oklahoma this year, it'd be a lot of fun to watch.
They had very little in the way of a pass rush last year.
Yeah.
They took a nice step forward as a defense, but that was the big thing last year. That if you're not able to get to the quarterback this year with this schedule,
it's a problem. It's a huge problem.
And then not starting over, but looking to find a rhythm on offense with a new quarterback and a rebuilt line, you can understand why the number is where it is, that there's skepticism about so much coming together with a more difficult schedule. This is a team that struggled with UCF last year, lost to Kansas, lost to Oklahoma State, a pretty good Oklahoma State team, but Oklahoma had probably a better quarterback than everybody on their schedule last year, maybe with the exception of Texas, and I want to say Dylan Gabriel had a better game than Quinn Ewers in that game. So Oklahoma was able to get by BYU, was able to get by some of these games, but didn't fully establish itself. And I think the same is true of Texas in some regard.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Established itself as we have figured out this conference. Oklahoma didn't make the Big 12 championship game last year. So that's where the concern lies now, that like you're taking the best part or the some of the better parts of last year's team on offense, removing them and introducing a tougher schedule.
No, look, Oklahoma will not win 10 games this season like they did last.
Right.
But I genuinely believe they will be a better team than last year.
Okay.
It's just the schedule. The schedule kind of negates some of that. I also don't think they're a 7-5 team. You know, the over-under is 7.5, excuse me, 7.5. Yeah. I'd be inclined to go over on that. I'm not throwing it in Takatoa. I'm not that sure of it.
You're going to have to be down on somebody in the SEC. I guess you're down on Arkansas and Mississippi State and Vanderbilt.
Teams, and I'm not throwing a lot in the volcano.
Right.
Doing this SEC preview because, frankly, there are a bunch of teams that I feel very conflicted on. And Oklahoma is one of them. Oklahoma is chief among them. I'd be inclined to go over on that number. I think they're 8-4.
Wow.
If all things really break in their direction, like you could squint and find a way to 9-3, I'm not there with it. But I'm optimistic that the defense is going to take another step forward. And I think separate from the offense, which has, I think, a lot to be excited about, maybe separate from the line, the defense is what drives this campaign for Oklahoma this year.
Okay, so here's the question then. If either Auburn or South Carolina are decent, it's really tough to find 8 wins here.
I know it is.
Because that final, basically after the first month of the season, it's kind of every week. And I always, of course, include the Maine Black Bears. But like it is week after week after week after week on this schedule.
It's tough. And
that's where I want depth, right? That's where I want 5 good receivers. That's where I want 7 good DBs. Maybe they have it. I know they're strong at safety. That's where I want, and they've recruited really well on the edge. Those guys are going to need to work out immediately this year. The young defensive linemen, if those guys come together, if young defensive linemen come together, this becomes a really interesting Oklahoma team.
Absolutely. And even a team like South Carolina, I mean, I can talk about them next, but what defines decent? They may not be decent. They might not be a bowl caliber team. I think they're clearly going to be on the drive for 6 this year. That's sort of been the name of the game under Shane Beamer.
Yeah.
But even if they lose, they're plucky. They've always been plucky in the time that Beamer's been there. And I think that's the version of the Gamecocks that we're going to see this year as well. So Oklahoma's got a tester on its hands, not just with Carolina, but with most of this schedule. Again, the 3rd toughest in the country. And they're fascinating to me. Like anytime you go into a new conference, it's interesting, but going into a conference like this under these circumstances with so much more difficult to schedule is kind of cruel, but from a football standpoint, from a fan standpoint, for somebody who cares about this game, you want to see good teams put in those situations where they're up against other quality opponents.
Sure.
And so that's what makes it interesting, if nothing else.
South Carolina, is that where we're going?
I'm ready.
I don't know, man. Here's the good thing. Here's the good news about South Carolina. I think Shane Beamer is pretty relentless as a recruiter and as somebody trying to find answers. I haven't loved his hires always, especially at offensive coordinator, but I think the talent is there. I think the growth is there. I mean, Lenore Sellers has to be good for this team to stand any chance to improve noticeably, but I'm curious what you think in terms of like what they need to fix, because there were elements of this team last year and they lose close games, but like there'll be a random week where they're just stomped on the ground. There'll be a random week where they just cannot touch anybody's defensive line. Like, they couldn't block a soul. Like, have they done enough? Where is the concern, and where am I overlooking them?
Well, I mean, look, the biggest question this year, as it's been, I feel, for a couple years running now, is about whether the line can hold up.
Beef.
On offense. We've seen it far too often where this team just gets pushed around against other SEC opponents. I think they're going to be better. I think it'll improve because they were also banged up and young a year
crazy
ago.
Injured last year. Yeah.
Yeah, and that never helps. It always kind of gets in the way. To what degree they improve, that remains to be seen. I don't think this is going to be one of the top units in the world, but they got to be better than they were a year ago. And that's got to be the concern. Frankly, that's got to be the biggest concern. Where I think we overlook South Carolina, 5-7 a year ago, over-under is 5.5 again, so Vegas expecting something in the same ballpark. They play hard. And I know on this show, it's kind of cliche to talk about pluckiness, but Shane Beamer does just kind of find a way. He miraculously made a bowl in his first 2 seasons. Not last year. They fell 1 game short.
Right.
But he finds a way to get the most out of these guys. And it's kind of like the new version of Beamer Bowl. By the way, I don't know if you saw, we're recording this on Tuesday, July the 30th. Earlier this morning, South Carolina trademarked Beamer Ball.
Oh, good for
They
them.
got a trademark on it. So even they're steering into it. I don't know if this means you can fire him now. I don't know what that means. But they got that now. They're obviously part of that culture. Where I think it's easy to overlook South Carolina going into this season, separate from the culture, is that this will be a different version of South Carolina that we see. Because Spencer Rattler's gone. And the personnel that is on hand now doesn't really support this air it out approach anymore. You're going to see more zone read stuff in the running game, which definitely works better with Lenora Sellers, who's, as you mentioned, the presumed starting quarterback, or Robbie Ashford, who transferred in.
Right.
Also, Rocket Sanders. Remember him from Arkansas? Yep. He transfers over. He was their big get in the transfer portal. Might still be the best running back in the entire conference. I like the flexibility of molding this scheme more to the players on the roster instead of trying to fit them into something. And I think it's essential to do that at a place like South Carolina, where bringing the talent in, certainly retaining the talent on a year-over-year basis, can be a real challenge in the era of the portal.
Yep.
So I like that approach that they are taking with this offense, and it will look, I think, very different. The other thing that I think is of note, I don't know if it's a concern or not, is wide receiver. Juice Wells, who we talked about on the last episode, went to Ole Miss. Xavier Leggett's in the NFL now. Those were 2 key pieces of this offense over the last couple of years, okay?
They've got the fastest guy at receiver in the country.
Nick
Harbor. Got that.
Nick Harbor, the sophomore.
Yeah.
So fast, he could have tried out for the Olympics if he wanted to. He didn't, but he's a monster. I looked up his stats. His vitals. They are 6'5", 240. He's listed as a wideout. He's a total freak. Only caught 12 balls last year. Could have a breakout campaign in a system like this. And I think it's essential that he become more a part of this offense if South Carolina is going to hit that over.
Agree.
You can put bigger receivers closer to the line, tight end style receivers closer to the line in a zone read system and leak them out, get him into the open field, or he can use a guy like this with his speed to take the top off a defense, get the run game going. But in either case, I think he's a key cog in the operation this season, especially since it's unclear as to who else might be there in that receiving core. Okay. Now, I know Juice Wells didn't have like a huge impact last year, only played a couple games, but
yeah,
you get the point. My point is that this is a depleted receiver room. And Nick Harbor right now is, I think, the one thing that we can sort of lean on as perhaps somebody who can create that variable or that mismatch that can help this offense. So
as long as he's Randy Moss, as long as he is arguably the greatest receiver of all time.
No, we're talking about 6 wins here. We're not talking about 10
I know what you're
wins.
saying. I'm being a silly man.
Yeah. And so that's both a concern and I think potentially something that's being overlooked. I also think the defense may be a little bit overlooked, if I'm being honest here. They were better against the run than the pass last year. They improved as the season went on. Now they've got a lot back. There are 8 starters back, 11th in returning production on defense. Probably the best defense that Shane Beamer's had in his time in Columbia.
Good.
I'm inclined to say this team is led by defense just because it feels like more of a known quantity to me, especially with how they ended the season, which was a high note. They were trending in a very, very good direction. But again, easy to overlook. Easy to overlook South Carolina. The over-under is very tasty to me. It is very tasty because there are 4 gimmies on this schedule with Old Dominion, Akron, Vandy, and Wofford. They're going to win those games. In order to hit that over of 5.5, they basically need to steal only 2 games from Kentucky on the road, home against
last year.
Yep. Home against LSU, home against Ole Miss, at Bama, at Oklahoma, home versus A&M, home versus Mizzou, and at Clemson. Those are 8 games, Dan. Can you count 2 in there that you feel good about?
I could see it. I mean, look, it's a Sellers thing. It's a quarterback thing. It's is he good enough to put a healthy amount of fear into defenses in this conference? Because if he's anything short of that, Spencer Rattler was fine. At times, not so much. At times, incredible. But, they lose the close game to Florida. I just think their margin for error isn't all that wide this season, all things considered.
No, it isn't.
So
it isn't,
they're going to be healthier along the line, which I think it goes a long way. They were comically injured up front last year on offense. So I think they can win some games. I feel pretty decently about South Carolina. I just don't feel like they're 8-4 South Carolina and threatening for that once again.
No, they're not 8-4. But I feel very optimistic about what this team is coming back, what they will look like. And I've been workshopping it in my head all week that I'm a Sellers buyer.
Yeah. Okay. What does that mean?
I'm just into Lenora Sellers. I think he's going to be pretty good.
A Sellers buyer. Okay.
Sellers buyer. Yeah, a little bit of, you see what I did there? I kind of mixed it up a little bit.
I still don't like their offensive coordinator that much. South Carolina. That gives me pause. Add Sean Elliott, recent head coach.
And I
over
think
tight ends.
Yeah, he's not gonna have a direct hand in play calling or anything of that nature. Right. But he does have an influence on the offense, and I think that will come into play a little bit when we start talking about this transition from an aired out approach to something that's more oriented around the ground.
Okay. I'm in on South Carolina as a bowl team.
I think I am too.
I just love Williams-Brice. I've said this over the years. I think it's great.
Do you know that the upper deck still shakes?
In
it shakes.
In big moments or just in general or during sandstorm?
Oh, definitely during sandstorm, but the upper deck shakes. And they've called in engineers to make sure that it's structurally sound, and it is, but
okay, good to know.
They've added special support and padding in between the joints. I don't know what they're called. But it still shakes, and apparently it's safe. So
great.
Incredible place to play.
Go Cox.
Go Cox. Where do you want to go now? Let's go Arkansas now. We were going to go Arkansas earlier.
America's snake in the toilet.
Yeah. Are they
Razorbacks? Yeah.
Are they going to fire Sam Pittman? Is he going to make it through the year?
I almost knocked over my coffee right there when you asked me that. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to make it through the year. Would love to see it. The things that I don't love about Arkansas is, one, the schedule's terrible.
It's horrible.
For Arkansas. That's the danger. Along with Arkansas's offensive line. And we'll see. They're constructed in a way from bringing in who they've brought in at offensive coordinator, bringing in the portal stuff that they've brought in on offense. I think Taylon Green is interesting. I think the best of him is good, but saving your high-pressure SEC job good? I don't know. I have my doubts. Behind a rebuilt line, which will be improved, but probably not incredible. The strength of this team is still probably up front on defense. Landon Jackson, I believe. He's good. He's really good. But they don't have 6 good defensive linemen. And that, to me, seems to be the issue. They've improved on defense, which I feel good about. But to what end, right? To what end is this team built to win 7 games in the SEC. Like, it's hard to piece together. I really like Jaquindon Jackson, the Utah running back that they've brought in, but I don't think he's somebody that, carries you to 2.5 more wins or something like that. I think he's a nice piece. Like, they don't have a ton of star power at receiver. Andrew Armstrong is good. He was the D2 transfer that came in last year. I thought he was good. But, like, if Arkansas is going to win a bunch of games, he should be your number 2 receiver, not your primary guy.
Yeah.
And so that coupled with this schedule, which, again, Arkansas can be the snake. Okay, so Auburn has Oklahoma the week after Arkansas. A&M has Mizzou a week after Arkansas. Tennessee has Oklahoma and then a bye the week before, and then Florida the week after. LSU has Arkansas sandwiched between Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Ole Miss has Arkansas between Oklahoma and Georgia. So I could see that if you're looking from afar at somebody's schedule, just like, oh yeah, no, there's Arkansas in there, so that's fine. It might not be fine, is all I'm saying. Yeah. That might be the role Arkansas is playing in the SEC this year. It's just, they need to be 2 games better to make a bowl. They went 4-8 last year. Had some close calls. The one win was against Florida in I think it was an overtime game. It's just, to me, very difficult whenever they were successful last year, it was KJ Jefferson sort of DIY, doing his own thing. And I think he was their leading rusher and didn't have the receivers, but made it work as often as he could behind that line, which was objectively, it was just terrible. It was a terrible offensive line in front of him. So, yes, they have been aggressive in the portal. I just don't know that in terms of bulk, in terms of quantity of difference makers, it's there.
No.
So, yes, they can go 5-7 against this schedule if they're dangerous enough up front on defense and the offensive line improves. And Bobby Petrino's vision for this team involves a very difficult combination of Taylon Green and Jaquindon Jackson on the ground creatively and, finding some pop and play action, whatever. And they approach it in a very smart way, and they get very lucky in terms of injury health. But I just listed off like 6 bullet points.
Yeah.
So I don't know what their over-under is.
Right. Yeah, Arkansas's over-under is 4.5 this year.
I did enjoy Bill Connolly saying that Arkansas is America's weird weather team. Like, if you don't like the weather in blank, wait 15 minutes. If you think Arkansas is bad and hopeless, wait a season. They're going to be weirdly pretty good. So there is that universe holdout for hope with Arkansas, that they're a team that Sam Pittman has been there long enough that he has a pretty good handle on what they are and what they're not. And there's enough new in the SEC where you just who knows? Arkansas could be weird and dangerous, because every 3 to 5 years they're weird and dangerous. Could that be this year? Yes, it could be. It's hard to connect the dots right now.
Well, it's hard to connect the dots, especially when you look at the collapse that they've seen along their offensive line.
Yeah.
That's supposed to be Sam Pittman's thing.
That's the siren.
That's the issue.
That's supposed to be his thing.
Supposed to be his thing.
If nothing else, yeah.
There have been many great line coaches who have ascended to be head coaches, and I think we felt really good about Sam Pittman, the early tenure of Sam Pittman. But the bottoming out of the line last year was really problematic. And I suppose time will tell as to whether or not that was a one-off. My hunch is it wasn't. There have been trend lines, but we'll see. I don't know. I'm not optimistic he makes it through the year.
Did you see he has a neon glowing slobbering hog statue on his property?
I did.
How can you not root for that?
I think culturally, he is
I want it to happen.
I think culturally, he is a terrific fit. I think he's probably a great dude. I think people want Sam Pittman to succeed. And I suspect if that weren't the case, he would have been gone.
Right.
Already. The fact that he's still around means that they want it to work for him. They really do want him to work out because they like what he brings to the university. But in the era now of the playoff, and especially in light of what we saw happen with that line play last year, 4-8 season, they don't make a bowl this year. I can't see it going on much longer for Pittman.
I hear you. Look, okay, so as I mentioned before, they're especially aggressive in the portal along both lines, along the offensive and defensive lines.
They are. They've been.
So if that pays off, especially early on, like, are things so dire that Arkansas should be, X and X by the bye week? I think it's after 6 weeks. So there's a bye after Tennessee before LSU. Like, do they need to be 3-3 for Sam Pittman to keep his job? Or do they want to get a jump on a process, and they already have Bobby Petrino in-house?
Yeah.
So it's at Oklahoma State week 2. Yeah. That's difficult, right? They open with Pine Bluff. They have UAB, who won't have much of a defense to take advantage of whatever Arkansas's offensive deficiencies are the week after that. At Auburn, Texas A&M. Or it's Texas A&M in Jerry World. I kind of think they need to be 3-3 after that Tennessee game for people to feel pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, they're basically going to have to win of those 4 games: Oklahoma State, Auburn, Texas A&M, Tennessee. They're going to have to win 1, probably 2, to feel good about heading into the grinder of the back half of the schedule.
It is a tough schedule. That's working against him too.
So I think they have to show proof of concept pretty early on, because he's been there a while.
Why don't you close out your teams and talk about Auburn?
No thanks. Okay, fine.
Auburn lost the Music City Bowl to Maryland.
Yeah.
Finished 6-7 in Hugh Freeze's first year. Their over-under this year is 7.5.
Mm-hmm.
I like Jarquez Hunter. I love Cam Coleman, their incoming freshman wideout. I think he's going to be their top target already. I liked Hugh Freeze calling the offense, which he started doing about midway through last season. I think it showed up in the numbers. I don't like Peyton Thorne really at all. And I don't like the amount of transition that we're going to see on defense. And I think that's my biggest hesitation. So
sure,
I've got Auburn right at 7-5 or 6-6, somewhere in there. I think maybe a better team. I think ultimately, say what you want about Hugh Freeze and DJ Durkin, but I think he will get that program on the right track. And I think that has already started. They were very aggressive trying to go out and get wide receivers via portal, high school recruiting, name it. So I think Hugh Freeze has a vision. I just don't know if it's going to materialize this year.
Okay, so in defense of Peyton Thorne, this was a pretty down offensive line in terms of pass protection. They were a good run blocking line. So if they can get better protecting Peyton Thorne, hypothetically, with a little bit more time, better receivers, another year of what should be very good running back play, he should improve. I don't think his ceiling is particularly high, but I think players around him might be able to make him look better than he realistically is. And that's a win, right? I think, Hugh Freeze as an offensive mind is good. Bringing in Derek Nix I thought was nice, given his experience in the league, given his experience with running backs especially, that if this can be a group that runs really well and can pop more because guys are getting open down the field, great. I think that's a big win. That's what makes Auburn dangerous this year, you don't need to squint to see offensive improvement. You mentioned the losses on defense. They lost a ton in the secondary and went after a bunch of guys in the secondary, built up some depth up front, which I think they needed to do. I think it's still a team that's going to be led by its defense, which, look, they lost a lot of key contributors from last year.
Yeah.
But with their aggression, with the playmakers on offense, it's not hard to see why they're dangerous and what their danger might be. Their danger is just, if you're looking at the 2023 team, just seeing a repeat, that they're leaving points on the board because they can't spread a defense out. They can't challenge a defense downfield, and their defense is inconsistent, and they're not closing out winnable games like the Iron Bowl. So that's the danger, that all of the steps that they've taken don't work out for one reason or another, and we see a rerun. I like them. I like Auburn this year.
Really?
Yeah. I think they're going to be a good
over
year
7.5?
7.5?
Yeah.
I think they can challenge it. I think they're home for the first month of the year, right?
Yeah.
Their non-conference schedule, they have Cal, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Cal is as scary this year as they might have been last year. That game was relatively close in Berkeley.
Yeah, it's Alabama, A&M, Cal, New Mexico, and Arkansas to open the year. That's when they start getting into the meat of the schedule. The end of September, Oklahoma and Georgia back-to-back weeks, then a bye, then Missouri and Kentucky back-to-back weeks on the road, come back home against Vanderbilt before another bye, and then they close out the season with ULM, Texas A&M, and a road game, obviously the Iron Bowl against Alabama. So the Auburn schedule really is like a 3 or 4 part play with the easy ones in the beginning and then 3 stretches of games where in those like little groupings of 3, you've got 2 toughies.
Sure. There's enough on this schedule though that like if there is, and this is a weird thing to say, if there's stability on the plains with Auburn, right? That Hugh Freeze has been there, that he has a good sense of what his team is and is not, he might be ahead. He knows what Peyton Thorne is. He knows what Peyton Thorne is not. He might be ahead of most of his schedule. You mentioned those games, right? Arkansas is in a down place. Oklahoma hasn't been in this conference and has a new quarterback. Georgia's going to be excellent, obviously. Mizzou should be very, very good. Kentucky, Mark Stoops largely hasn't figured out offense, right?
No.
That doesn't mean he hasn't had good teams that have won a bunch of games, but like there's a deficiency there. Vandy should be vulnerable. Texas A&M has a new coach and has had quarterback injury history. And Alabama has a new coach, and we have no idea what they're truly going to be. And Hugh Freeze in year 1 likely should have beaten Nick Saban in Alabama and this quarterback. They needed a miracle play. So, yes, Auburn is a crazy wild card, but this is a good year to be Auburn. Okay. In my mind, it is.
Wow.
I'm probably taking the under. I think they're right there at 7 wins. I think they improve, but I think they're probably going to lose something stupid and win something stupid. So I have them at 7-5 with a 50-50 game to go to 8-4.
Okay. Wow.
7-5. Yeah.
Fair enough. 2 teams left.
Yeah.
Tennessee and Kentucky. Who are you into
these are
more?
good ones, man. Good teams to talk about.
I got two things to throw here in the volcano over these next 2
okay.
previews. Let me start with Kentucky, though. 7-6 last year. They played the Gator Bowl, that fun Gator Bowl against Clemson. Lost 38-35 by a field goal. Forget the exact final score. I am very interested in this Kentucky over-under of 6.5 this year. We did that whole Kentucky episode. Go back a few months. We talked to Nick Roosh.
Yes.
From Kentucky Sports Radio. The title of that was Will It Ever Happen for Mark Stoops and the Cats? I think there's a lot right with this program. But I feel like we're always waiting for another offense that isn't one-dimensional. Like Ray Davis was great last year, the transfer. But Devin Leary never got going. So it was all on Ray Davis. In the offseason, they go back in the portal now. They're trying to find another quarterback. This time they land Brock Vandagriff from Georgia. Full disclosure, you're on record too. We're both card-carrying Vandagrifters.
Yeah.
I think he is a good fit for what they want to do on offense, but the real question is what the offense will look like now, because it will look a little bit different. Liam Cohen is gone. My guy made a career off that 1 year with Will Levis and didn't do much with Devin Leary, so now he's off. Now it's Bush Hamden running the offense. I talked about his background a little bit in part 1. He was previously at Boise State. We should see tight ends get more involved. We should see some tempo in spots. I think we again see a scheme built around the run.
Sure.
And what I like about Brock Vandagriff is that he's big and he's mobile. I think if Brock Vandagriff can take to this system, Kentucky could be very dangerous because there's ample talent around him, Dan.
Agreed.
I think like the line is back. Most of the receivers are back. They brought in Chip Trainum, the transfer at running back, who's bounced around and has been a million different places.
ASU, Ohio State, now Kentucky. Yep.
I just feel like this scheme with this quarterback and with the personnel on hand is such that if it takes, it should be pretty good. They really should be. Defensively, 9 or 10 guys back. It's historically been a pretty good
Dude,
defense.
Their line and secondary should be pretty filthy.
Ah,
The corners
the front-
especially, yeah.
The front seven's going to be nasty.
Yeah.
I think most Kentucky fans would probably tell you that the pass defense left something to be desired last season, but
Oh, yeah.
there's enough back in the secondary that you can assume something of a step forward. They're just going to be big and really nasty in the front seven, which I also think makes them very dangerous. Guys like Deion Walker and J.J. Weaver, De'Aaron Jackson, like this is Havoc Central, Dan.
That was your scouting report in high school as a second baseman. Like, here's what you have to know about Ty Hildenbrand. Big and nasty.
Big and nasty.
Big and nasty.
Huge.
You don't want any part of them. Yep.
So I look at this roster, I look at this schedule, and I do not see a 6-6 team. Again, bear in mind, over-under is 6.5.
Right.
7-5 season, which would hit the over. That only assumes losses at Ole Miss, at Florida, at Tennessee, at Texas, and at home against Georgia. 5 very good teams, or, well, 4 very good teams plus Florida.
Yeah.
I don't think Kentucky's going to lose all 5 of those games. And the rest of the schedule, to me, looks very workable. So I've got Kentucky at 8-4 this season. Give me the over, and let's throw it and take a toe.
Oh, more takes. Why it burns.
Do you
I
think,
like this team. I
do you
really
think
do.
it's appropriate that if Kentucky's good in the middle part of their schedule, is it appropriate for us to bring back Brocktober?
Oh, I think we might have to.
I think we are the ultimate arbiters of that. So yes, I think it's okay.
We could, yeah. Oh, absolutely, we could.
I think 8-4 is dependent on you being, what are we calling it? The Vandegrifter?
Got to be a Vandegrifter.
You got to be a Vandegrifter. You
They're
cannot
going 8-4.
You turned down my pitch of being Brock Hard. So a Vandegrifter it is.
I think Vandegrifter. You got to be a Vandegrifter if you're going over. And to your point, like it's October that's going to make or break this. It's Vandy, it's Florida, it's Auburn, and it's Tennessee.
Yeah,
kind of right in that meaty middle there. And there are tough games, kind of bookending that little stretch in between, like in the middle of the season. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen because they do well in that stretch of the year.
That's when Brocktober, right there.
It's Brocktober, yeah. But I'm in, man. I'm really in.
Close the gap against Tennessee, if that counts for anything last year. Got destroyed 2 years ago. Lost by single digits last year. 1-score game.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Huge.
Yeah, if Brock Vandegrift is half as good as his recruiting projection, could have something here. I don't know.
I agree.
I like what I'm seeing here.
Okay.
Which brings us to the Tennessee Volunteers.
Yeah. I can't wait for Tennessee football this year.
Really? You pumped?
I think Tennessee is as close to a team that I am interested in watching just because I can't wait to watch them, right? Just because I can't wait to watch James Pierce and Nico and Chris Brazel and Squirrel White and Brew McCoy. Like there are too many guys on this team, the secondary. I'm just like, I really just want to watch college football and have Tennessee be on the screen while I do it. I don't know. Do you feel that way?
Tennessee's my bet of the preseason.
Okay. Oh, this is dangerous.
Why it burns.
Their over-under is 8.5.
We get destroyed by Georgia, but yeah.
Over-under is 8.5. They went 9-4 last year. They lost the game to Florida, to Bama, to Mizzou, to Georgia. They did shut out Iowa for what it's worth in the Citrus Bowl.
Great.
We care about such things. But at long last, Nico is the starting quarterback now. Iamaleava is how you say the name.
Nico is how I say it.
He is a monster. He is 6'6". He is 215. He's a tall glass of water, frankly. Got some reps last year. We saw him again in the spring game. I have not seen anything so far that throws cold water on the hype. The comp for him coming out of high school, for what it's worth, if you care about such things, Justin Herbert actually ended up being pretty good.
Yeah.
All things considered.
Agree.
I think he's legit. I think it goes without saying that Josh Heupel and his system with a 5-star quarterback is going to be dangerous. It's just going to be dangerous. Plus, you got Brew McCoy back, who you mentioned. Squirrel White's back, who you mentioned. Chris Brazel coming in from Tulane, who you mentioned. Also, Mike Matthews, the 5-star wideout, who had offers everywhere in the country. I think, if I remember correctly, and I should have gone back and checked before we hit record, I want to say after the Tennessee spring game, or the spring scrimmage, whatever they had, everybody was talking up Mike Matthews.
Oh, yeah. The young
He was-
receiver, yeah.
He was the toast of that spring thing, if memory serves. And so they have enough out wide. They also added Holden Stays, the tight end from Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
This offense is going to score. They would score with lesser personnel. They will certainly score with this personnel. It's not even a question in my mind. Also, the front seven is loaded. They are, the line in particular, maybe the best in the nation, led by your boy, my boy, James Pierce, who by the time all is said and done could end up being the top overall pick in next year's draft. He is a freak athlete. He is an incredible edge rusher. I would encourage everybody who has the video game to just play an exhibition with James Pierce in Tennessee. He is comically fast. It's like not even real.
I love that.
So I like what they have up front. My biggest question about this defense is how long it's going to take the secondary to figure itself out, because it's entirely new back there. It's debatable whether Josh Heupel patched enough of that hole in the secondary via the portal to make it better or sustainable or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's really the issue I have with this team. It's the secondary. They're going to score. They're going to be great in the front seven. It's just, are they going to be able to throw all over them? So I'm in. Like I'm on 10-2 Tennessee this year. I've got them losing to Bama and Georgia. Bama and Georgia as losses. I think the offense will be electric. I am ecstatic to see Nico at quarterback. I think the line's going to be dominant. I think an early game, frankly, against Oklahoma is going to be a great bellwether for both teams. That's a game I'm particularly interested in. I think it's going to tell us a lot about what's to come. But yeah, I'm all in on Tennessee over that 8.5.
What's going to happen when they lose week 2 to my NC State Wolfpack in Charlotte, Ty? What's going to happen then? I thought Grayson McCall was like 2 weeks ago. You were ready to run away to Ibiza with Grayson McCall. What happened?
They're not beating Tennessee, though.
Okay.
Be a good year. I think it'll be a good year for NC State. They're not beating Tennessee.
Okay. Tennessee's going to be really fun. They're going to be really good. Do you have the NFL draft chime you use for fantasy things, by the way?
I can pull it up quickly if you want me to.
Okay. I have no idea if we're doing fantasy things this year or not, a show, or we'll do it in some fashion perhaps. But if you're looking to get a winning fantasy things pick, Hold on.
Whoa.
Nico Iamaleava played volleyball on a high level.
Oh. Iamaleava
played volleyball on a very high level in high school. They will show clips all year long.
Thing. Yeah. I think
That's
I agree.
It. I hope someday, like he and T-Mac, when they hang it up, decide to pull. You see Chase Budinger? Remember the old Arizona? I think he was on the Houston Rockets too. But he was a great volleyball player growing up, and now he's on the Olympic team.
Yeah.
Be a nice story. T-Mac and Nico.
Great.
Post-football retirement. Okay. I think I'm with you. I think I'm with you with how Tennessee has been building to this moment. I know when we did the Tennessee episode that we talked about some concern at running back and star power and depth at running back. We'll see. But man, they're in good shape all over the place. Especially
really
if the secondary
good.
works out. I think they're in good shape in the secondary, but they're relying on some new faces.
Very new back there. And if you're going to go at them, that's how you go at them. At least to start the season. The
Florida loss last year is in my head a little bit. And that's Joe Milton, and that's a different situation. And I actually really like that Nico had a year of seasoning, which, like, you look at the quarterback class he came in with, like Dante Moore pressed into duty, Jaden Rashada plays and gets hurt. Like, it's nice. It's a nice luxury for him to be able to sort of sit and wait. So he has every opportunity to become, I mean, look, at his best in this system, he could be the best quarterback in this conference. Absolutely.
All right, that does it, Dan. We did it. We made it through the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
Part 3 now in the books. You know the drill. Write in, leave a comment wherever you can. Our email address is solidverbal@gmail.com. Wherever you can leave a comment. Comments are encouraged. Try to be nice, but if you got anything to say, anything we got wrong, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to correct our errors. That's why we've got our losing horn sound. We keep it at the ready at all times here as we're doing these previews. 3 power conferences now in the books. We've got the Big Ten yet to go. We're also going to do a preview talking about Notre Dame and Washington State and Oregon State and, of course, UMass. We're going to hit every team, every conference here before all is said and done. Hit follow, hit subscribe if you're new here so that you don't miss any of our episodes. They're going to drop every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, not just now, but through the college football season. So a lot more content. We will be with you every step of the way here.
Yes.
To help you get through what I think is going to be a season that's fun as hell in 2024. There are so many new things, so many new faces, new rules. A lot is changing. Hopefully we can kind of grow into that with the Verballerhood because it's new for us too.
Oh, yeah.
And we can do it as a community. I think that's what we're encouraging everybody to do as they go to verballers.com or follow us on social media or at a minimum hit follow or subscribe on the podcast.
What you're saying is do not sleep on the SEC. Do not sleep on the Solid Verbal. And if you are going to sleep, get yourself a mattress from Sit and Sleep at all participating LA and Orange County locations. So the story behind that, Ty, by the way.
Oh, you're doing the mattress thing again. That's right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, you said I could do it at the end,
No,
right?
no, go ahead, please. I forgot.
You have favorite like local radio commercials, I'm sure, that you grew up with that are still in circulation. Although I think you listen to podcasts and Sirius probably more than you used to. The whole campaign was, this is probably to this day, is Larry, who owns the mattress store, is talking to like his accountant or his lawyer. And his accountant or lawyer is yelling at him. He's like, you cannot afford to keep slashing these prices. You're going to ruin everything. And he says, I don't care. I'm doing it for all of Southern California's best sleepers. And he always says, you're killing me, Larry. And he always says, if you don't love your mattress, it's free.
Right.
And it was, and probably still is, the best. Not a sponsor. Would love them to be.
All right. Well, a great note to close this out on, Dan.
Yeah.
Reballers.com. Check it out. Our website, solidverbal.com. Check that out. Hit follow, hit subscribe. Tell your friends if you have yet to do so. We will be back. Next up, it is the Big Ten. 18 teams, Dan. 18 teams. Save your voice. We're going to need it. For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrand, thanks for hanging with us here. SEC officially in the books. We'll see you. Talk Big Ten next. Stay solid.
Peace.